I didn't cry at my sister's wedding. Not when the string quartet played the processional and everyone turned to watch her float down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my first car. Not when my father placed her hand in my brother-in-law's and wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist. Not even when the maid of honor gave a speech that named every single person who had helped make the day possible: the florist, the caterer, the photographer, the calligrapher who did the seating cards, and never once said my name. I just sat in the third row, smoothed my dress over my knees, and smiled at whoever happened to glance my way. I had learned a long time ago that in my family, some people are celebrated and some people are useful. I had always been the useful one. Let me back up. My sister is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the one my parents introduced first at every family gathering, every church potluck, every neighborhood barbecue. She was bright and charming and knew how to fill a room. I was the quiet one, the one who sat in the corner with a book, the one who eventually wandered into the kitchen to help clean up because standing around, making small talk felt like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. I didn't resent her for it then. I actually loved her. I still do, in the way you love someone who has disappointed you so many times that the love has become something quieter, more careful, like a flame you cup with both hands in the wind. After college, I got a degree in computer science and built a career as a web developer and UX designer. I was good at it. Not in a bragging way, I just genuinely loved the work, the logic of it, the way a well-built system hummed along invisibly and let everything else run smooth. My parents owned a small catering business. They had started it when I was in middle school, run it out of our garage initially, and eventually grown it into something respectable. They had a commercial kitchen, a staff of about 12, a website that my father had paid a college kid $500 to build in 2009 and had never touched since. I redesigned the whole thing for them in 2018. For free, obviously. I built them a booking system, a client portal, a menu management dashboard, an automated invoice system. I migrated their client database. I set up their email marketing. I registered their domain, paid for the hosting out of my own pocket for the first 2 years because they kept forgetting, and when they finally started paying me back for the hosting costs, they Venmo'd me with a note that said THS and a cupcake emoji. I also became, unofficially, the person who handled every technology problem in the family. Computer won't start? Call me. Phone won't sync? Call me. The router's blinking funny? Call me at 11 on a Tuesday. I didn't mind. I really didn't. It felt good to be needed, even if needed and valued aren't the same thing. It took me a long time to understand the difference. My sister had moved to Chicago after college, married her husband, an attorney named Daniel, and settled into a life that looked, from the outside, like a catalog photograph. Big apartment, nice car, friends with good jobs and good teeth. She came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and called my parents every Sunday. They talked about her the way people talk about a painting they're proud to own. When my sister announced her second wedding, she and Daniel had eloped the first time, and my mother had never fully forgiven her for it. My parents offered to help pay. My sister wanted something beautiful. Something that would make up for the courthouse ceremony that my mother had only learned about via a text message with a photo attached. The planning started 14 months out. My mother called me 2 weeks after the engagement and asked if I could build a wedding website. Nothing fancy, she said. Just something for the guests, with the details, maybe an RSVP form. I spent 3 weekends building something that was, genuinely, better than fancy. It had a custom domain, a responsive design, an RSVP system that automatically updated a shared spreadsheet for my mother and sister to track, a countdown clock, a photo gallery, an interactive map of the venue with parking information and accessibility notes. I integrated it with an email service so that every confirmed guest got an automatic reminder 1 week before the date, and again the morning of. My sister texted me when I sent her the link. It said, "OMG, this is so cute. You're literally magic." I saved that text. I don't know why. Maybe I already knew, somewhere underneath, that it would be the last time she said something like that to me. The months leading up to the wedding were a steady accumulation of small moments that I filed away without examining too closely. The way my parents talked about the wedding at every family dinner as though it were being organized entirely by my sister and my mother, with no mention of the website, or the vendor coordination I had helped with, or the hours I spent on the phone with the venue's AV team to make sure the slideshow I had built would display correctly on their system. The way my sister introduced me to her friends when they came to town for the bachelorette as my little sister, she does something with computers. The way my mother, when a family friend asked who had built the wedding website and called it stunning, said, "Oh, we had some help with that." Some help. I was the help. I didn't say anything. I refilled the iced tea and passed the cookies and drove home afterward and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for about 10 minutes before I went inside. The wedding was in September. 72 guests, outdoor ceremony, tented reception at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside of the city. I was a bridesmaid, technically, though my sister had 5 of them and I was 5th in the lineup and had been given a different shade of the bridesmaid dress color than the other 4, which my mother said was because it suited my complexion better, and which I chose to believe. The reception was beautiful. I'll give my sister that. The flowers were extraordinary, the food was excellent, the band was the kind of band that makes even people who don't dance get up and dance. I stood at the edge of the tent and watched my parents spin together on the dance floor and felt something complicated and tender move through my chest. Then my father gave his toast. He talked about my sister for 7 minutes. He talked about the day she was born, her first steps, her college graduation, the day she called him crying from Chicago because she thought she had made a terrible mistake in her career and he had talked her through it. He talked about Daniel, about how proud he was to call him his son. He said. And I am not paraphrasing. We raised a daughter who lights up every room she enters, who makes everyone around her feel like the most important person in the world. He looked right at my sister when he said it. He did not look at me. When the toast was over and the applause faded, I went to find a glass of water. My mother found me at the drink station and squeezed my arm and said, "Your father's so emotional tonight." I nodded. I poured my water. Later, during the part of the reception where the family mingling happened, the part where aunts and uncles circulated, and people told you how much you'd grown even though you were 31 years old. My uncle found me near the dessert table and asked what I had been up to lately. I started to tell him about a project I had just finished, a platform I had built for a nonprofit client that I was genuinely proud of. My mother appeared at my elbow. "She's been such a big help with the wedding," my mother said. To my uncle, not to me. She handled all the technology stuff. "You know how she is with computers." My uncle said, "Oh, wonderful," and turned to my mother to ask about the flowers. I stood there for another moment, holding my small plate of wedding cake, and then I set it down on the table and excused myself to the restroom. I stood at the bathroom sink and ran cold water over my wrist the way I used to do when I was in high school and feeling overwhelmed, a trick I had learned from a school counselor who had told me it helped calm the nervous system. It did help. It always had. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, quietly, to my own reflection, enough. Not dramatically. Not as a declaration. Just as a fact. Enough. The evening ended. People said their goodbyes. My sister hugged me at the door and said she couldn't have done it without me, and I hugged her back and told her she looked beautiful because she did. The car ride home was quiet. I turned the radio off about 5 minutes in and drove the rest of the way in silence. That night, I didn't sleep well. I lay in the dark and thought about the website. About the domain. About the hosting account that was registered in my name on my credit card, auto-renewed every year on November 14th. I thought about the booking system. About the fact that my parents' entire catering operation ran through the platform I had built them. Every booking inquiry, every client contract, every invoice, every automated reminder went through that system. Their email list, 463 past clients and referral contacts, lived in the account I had set up for them. I thought about how, in all the years I had maintained that system, updated it, troubleshot it, rebuilt sections of it from scratch. When better tools became available, no one had ever once asked me to document how it worked. No one had ever asked for the admin credentials. No one had ever suggested that maybe they should know how to access any of it themselves, just in case, because I would always just handle it. I fell asleep somewhere around 3 in the morning. I want to be careful here about what I did and didn't do. Because I've thought about it a lot since, and I think the distinction matters. I did not sabotage anything. I did not break anything, delete anything, corrupt any data, or take anything that belonged to someone else. I simply stopped doing something I had always done voluntarily, for free, for years, with no acknowledgement and no compensation. The domain was registered to me. The hosting account was mine. I had been paying for it, or being very loosely reimbursed for it. For 6 years, I had every legal and practical right to let it go. In early October, about 3 weeks after the wedding, I logged into the registrar account and turned off auto-renewal for the domain. I made a note in my calendar for November 14th. I also logged into the hosting account and set a note that the renewal was not to be processed. Then I went about my life. The thing about a decision made quietly is that it doesn't feel like a decision while you're living it. October passed. I worked. I saw friends. I went to a work conference in Denver and ate excellent green chile and bought a turquoise ring from a market vendor and felt, for a few days, genuinely light. November came. On November 3rd, my mother called to tell me that my sister and Daniel were expecting. I told her that was wonderful news. It was wonderful news. I meant it. On November 9th, my father called to ask if I could look at something on his laptop the next time I was in town. On November 14th, the domain expired. I didn't do anything on November 14th. I went to work. I ate lunch at my desk. I went for a run in the evening. I made pasta. I watched something on television that I don't remember now. The call came on November 16th. It was my mother. She said the website wasn't working. She said she had a prospective client who had tried to go to the website and gotten an error message. She said she had 3 other clients who had emailed her because their automated reminders had stopped coming. She said the online booking form wasn't working and someone had called to complain. I told her the domain had expired. She said, "What do you mean expired?" I said, the registration has to be renewed every year. I said, it lapsed on November 14th. She said, well, can you renew it? I said, I could. But I think it's actually a good time to talk about transitioning the account into your name, since you'll want to have control of it going forward. There was a pause. She said, what do you mean going forward? I said, I've been maintaining the website and all the systems for 6 years at no charge. I'm going to start consulting with some clients on their digital infrastructure and I need to free up my capacity. I can renew this one last time and spend a few hours putting together documentation and transferring the accounts to you or whoever you want to manage them. Or I can refer you to a developer who can take over and I can walk them through everything. I just need a couple weeks' notice either way. Another pause. Longer this time. She said, I didn't realize you felt like this was a burden. I said, it isn't a burden. It's just work. Work that I've been glad to do, but work that has real value, and I think we should acknowledge that as we figure out next steps. She said she would talk to my father and call me back. My father called the next morning. I could tell by the way he said my name that he had rehearsed what he was going to say. He said he appreciated everything I had done for the business over the years. He said he hadn't realized the website had gotten so complicated. He said he and my mother wanted to discuss what would be fair. I said I thought that was a great idea and suggested we get together the following weekend. Then he said something that I will probably think about for a long time. He said, I just want to make sure we handle this the right way. The business has a big proposal going out on the 22nd. A corporate client, a lot of money, they're going to want to see the portfolio on the website. He said it the way he had always said things to me. Practically. Informatively. As though the most relevant piece of information in the conversation was the deadline, not the 6 years, not the wedding, not the night I stood at a drink station and heard my mother describe my work as some help. I said, I understand. Let's talk this weekend and figure out the transition plan. He said, can you get the website back up before the 22nd? I said, yes, once we sit down and discuss the handover, I can prioritize getting it back online. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we didn't realize how much you were doing. I almost left it there. I almost just said thank you and moved on. But I had been careful and quiet and graceful for 31 years, and something in me had decided, 3 weeks ago in the dark, that I was done confusing grace with invisibility. I said, I know you didn't. I think that's actually the thing we need to talk about. We sat down that Saturday at my parents' kitchen table. All 4 of us, me, my mother, my father, and my sister on FaceTime from Chicago because my mother had called her, which I had not expected but decided not to react to. My sister's face on the screen was careful in a way I recognized. She was trying to look neutral while also showing my parents that she was concerned. She was good at that. She had always been the one who could manage a room. I had brought a document. 3 pages. Printed. It was an itemized accounting of everything I had built and maintained for the business over 6 years, with rough market rates for each component, not what I would have charged a client, which would have been considerably higher, but what a reasonable contractor in my field would charge for the same work. The total was substantial. More than my parents had probably anticipated. I didn't present it as a bill. I presented it as context. I said, this is what the work has been worth. I'm not asking to be paid retroactively. I'm asking that going forward, we have a clear understanding of what this work costs so that whoever takes it on, me or someone else, is fairly compensated. My father looked at the document for a long time. My sister said, from the phone screen, that seems like a lot. I said, it's actually below market rate. My mother said, we just assumed since it was family. I said, I know. That's why we're talking about it now. The conversation was uncomfortable. There were moments when I could feel everyone at the table waiting for me to soften, to add, but of course I was happy to help, to do the thing I had always done, which was to make my own needs smaller, so that no one else had to feel the friction of them. I didn't do that. I sat with the discomfort and let it be in the room. By the end of the conversation, we had agreed on 3 things. My father would pay me a monthly retainer, starting in December, for ongoing maintenance of the platform and systems. I would transfer the domain and hosting accounts into the business's name, with my father as the account holder. I would put together documentation thorough enough that any competent developer could take over if they chose to bring someone else in. My sister, from the phone screen, said, I just think it's important that we don't let this create distance in the family. I looked at her face on the screen. I said, I don't want distance either. I want to be seen accurately. Those aren't the same thing. She didn't have an answer for that. After my parents and I wrapped up the details and I was putting my papers back into my bag, my father walked me to the door. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the doorframe and I could see him trying to find the right thing to say. He said, I meant what I said in the toast. About the kind of people we raised. I looked at him. I said, you raised 2, Dad. He didn't say anything. But something moved across his face that I hadn't seen in a long time, something that looked like being caught. I drove home. This time I turned the radio on. It's been about 6 months since that conversation. The website is back up. The domain is in my father's name now. I transferred every account, wrote 37 pages of documentation, and recorded 4 tutorial videos walking through the admin systems. I was, as I always am, thorough. My parents and I talk regularly. There have been some awkward phone calls and at least 2 dinners where I could feel my mother choosing her words carefully, which was new. There's a different quality to things between us now, less easy, maybe, but also less false. I find that I prefer it. My sister and I have talked twice since that Saturday. Once she called to check in, and the conversation was careful and a little stilted but ended warmly. The second time she called to tell me they had found out the baby's gender. She wanted me to know before anyone else, she said. Just me, first. I don't know what to do with that. I'm still thinking about it. What I know is this. I spent years being useful, and I mistook usefulness for belonging. I showed up and solved problems and built things and maintained things and drove 40 minutes in the dark to fix a router issue on a Tuesday night, and I told myself that every one of those moments was a deposit in something real. That the account was filling up. That eventually the balance would show somewhere, in a toast or a conversation or a look across a dinner table that said, "We know who you are, and we're grateful." It doesn't work that way. Or at least, it doesn't work that way automatically. What I've learned is that visibility requires action. Not anger. I didn't do any of this out of anger. But a quiet, clear refusal to disappear. A willingness to sit at the table and let people see the actual size of what you carry. There's a version of this story where I let the domain expire and said nothing. And it would have felt like revenge, and it would have tasted like that for a few days, and then it would have left me exactly where I started. That wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was to be in the room. To be named. To have my work called work and my time called time and my contribution acknowledged as something more than a convenience. I renewed the domain before the 22nd. My father got his corporate client. The portfolio looked good. I know because I built it. I'm on the retainer now. It's not what I'm worth. But it's something, and it's named, and there's a conversation we can have when the contract comes up for renewal. That conversation will be easier than the last one. Or maybe it won't be. But I'll have it either way. The ringtone I have set for my mother is one I chose a few years ago and never changed. It's warm and recognizable. And when it lights up my phone, I no longer feel that flicker of anxiety wondering what I'll be asked to. Ado. I answer it because I want to, and when I don't want to, I call back the next morning. I am learning the difference between a family member and a family. One is something you're born into. The other is something you build. I know how to build things.